So Anthony Joshua stops Matt Skelton in 2 rounds. Matt Skelton is obviously nearly 50 years old. He's way past his sell-by date, but he's still a very tough man. And he said that he had a better preparation for this fight and was in better condition than he was for the David Price fight, which wasn't that long ago. So I think it's fair to compare Anthony Joshua's performance against Matt Skelton to David Price's performance. And I thought that Anthony Joshua did a better job than David Price. I thought that David Price looked uncomfortable under pressure in a Matt Skelton fight. Me, Dwyer, and a couple of other YouTubers noted, we saw certain things in that Matt Skelton fight that concerned us about David Price. He seemed uncomfortable under pressure. He seemed a bit bamboozled as well when Skelton gave him some lateral movement. So I picked up on certain things in there, even his demeanor, his body language. David Price's body language didn't look too promising. A lot of people don't pick up on these things because they allow the commentary to color their perception of what's actually taking place. Whereas someone who's a bit more objective and can distance themselves or detach themselves from what the commentators are saying and focus on what's actually going on in the ring and can actually read the fighter's body language, especially someone that actually has boxing experience themselves, they're able to pick up on these things. Okay, and I thought that David Price looked quite uncomfortable and flustered in the Matt Skelton fight, especially in the first round. Obviously, he got the job done in the second round with body shots, but that was one of the first David Price fights which I watched, which gave me a lot of concern about him. Not just in terms of his technical deficiencies, but also in terms of his mentality. Because I felt, and another guy who commented on my video at the time, my post-fight video on the Matt Skelton fight, Jose Silva, he also said, I remember in one of his comments, that he thought David Price almost looked a little sorry for himself at times in the Skelton fight when he was up against the ropes getting roughed up. So comparing Joshua's performance against Skelton to Price's performance, I think Joshua did better in terms of his demeanor. He seemed more in control and more comfortable under pressure than David Price did against Skelton. So I was definitely more impressed with Joshua's performance than Price's performance against the same opponent. But with all that said, Joshua was still making mistakes. Yes, he's in the embryonic stages of his boxing career. He had relatively few amateur fights for a guy who's being touted as a future world champion. Guys like Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko had, 100 fights or over. I know Lewis had, I think, just under 100 fights and Vladimir had well over 100 fights. So he's relatively inexperienced for a guy who is being touted so highly, even as an amateur. So he's going to make mistakes at this point in his career. The problem, and I've addressed this in a previous video about this particular topic, the problem is that he's making the same mistakes over and over again. And when you see that, that is an issue, as far as I'm concerned, for the trainer. And his trainer, in my opinion, is not teaching him what he needs to learn. Okay? I think Anthony Joshua should go with a more experienced trainer, a guy who's trained heavyweights especially. That's what I believe. Because to be making the same mistakes over and over again is not good. And one of the mistakes he was making against Skelton, and he got away with it against Skelton because Skelton is nearly 50 years old and he's slow. But Skelton knew what to do. He knew how to exploit the mistakes, but he couldn't get the shots off quick enough because he's, nearly 50 years old and, like I say, he's very slow. But one thing Joshua was doing is he was pulling back from punches with his chin in the air, with his left hand down, going back in a straight line, sometimes even against the ropes. That is suicide against a guy who can cover the ground quickly and hit you with a right hand like a Deontay Wilder or like a David Haye. You don't want to pull straight back like that with your chin in the air. And Matt Skelton was inches away with a couple of right hands, even in the first round, from landing flush on Anthony Joshua's chin. You don't want to pull straight back like that. And he's done that in several fights. This is an ongoing, reoccurring error that he's making. And his training setup are just not addressing it. I don't believe that he's a guy that can't learn certain things. No, he's at the embryonic stages of his career. Right now, he should be pretty malleable. You should be able to mold him in whatever way you want to mold him. He's a terrific athlete, obviously. So he's still making certain mistakes. I'm concerned about his training setup. Yes, he got the job done against Matt Skelton, as he was expected to. But going forward, I'm concerned, man. I'm very, very concerned. Anthony Joshua has got tremendous potential. But having potential and fulfilling your potential are two very different things. To fulfill your potential, you need the right setup, you need the right trainer, you need the right fights, you need the right management, you need the right environment, etc., etc. Now, I got to shout out Boxing Beats and Rhymes because he alerted the YTBC, all those who are subscribed to his channel, to a fight which I've wanted to see for a long time. I obviously knew about this fight a long time ago. A couple years ago I knew about it, but I'd never actually seen it, and it's finally been uploaded to YouTube. And that is Anthony Joshua's first amateur loss, which was to fellow heavyweight contender from the UK, Dillian Whyte. And I was always intrigued to see this fight. Now, this was only Anthony Joshua's third amateur fight, and I believe it was Dillian Whyte's second or third amateur fight. But Dillian Whyte, I believe, did have one or two kickboxing matches before it, or MMA matches or something like that. So Dillian Whyte had a little bit more experience, but it wasn't vastly more experienced or anything. Both of them were very raw. I won't leave a link in the description because you know, funny things can happen on YouTube sometimes with copyright. So just type in Anthony Joshua versus Dillian Whyte and the fight will pop up anyway. You can go watch it for yourselves. I found it very interesting. Both of them were very raw, but Dillian Whyte beat Joshua. He dropped him and he really schooled him in the fight. Beat him comprehensively. Again, this is a very early amateur fight. You can't read too much into early amateur fights. All right, Lennox Lewis got schooled by Tyrell Biggs in the amateurs. In the pros, he destroyed him. Okay, Mike Tyson got beat by Henry Tillman twice in the amateurs. In the pros, he destroyed him in one round. So you can't always judge a fight in the professional game by, you know, something that happened in the amateur ranks. But with all that said, it was interesting just seeing the two guys in the ring together and how their physical attributes, you know, size up against each other. Because Dillian Whyte has got extremely long arms. He's one of them heavyweights that has ridiculously long arms for his height. Other examples of heavyweights who have very long arms for their height are people like Hasim Rahman, Sonny Liston, Lennox Lewis. These guys with very long arms tend to have, surprise, surprise, very good jabs. Because even against opponents who are taller than them, they often actually have the longer reach, the longer arms, and they're able to command the fight from long range with that long jab. And in the fight with Dillian Whyte, it was clear that Whyte had much longer arms than Anthony Joshua. You'll see what I'm saying when you watch the fight. Even though Joshua's significantly taller, his arms are way shorter than Dillian Whyte. So Dillian Whyte's able to control the fight with this very, very good jab, solid jab that's snapping Anthony Joshua's head back, and he's able to fire off combinations and other shots off that jab. Worked very, very well. Now in the professional ranks, obviously Joshua's come on a lot since then, but so has Dillian Whyte. He's been out there sparring pretty much every top heavyweight on the planet. And Dillian Whyte has got a tremendous amount of heart and ambition. He don't go into sparring people like Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko acting like, you know, oh, thank you, Mr. Klitschko, for even allowing me to be here and grace my, you know, and just allow me to come into your camp and whatnot. And he's not down there kissing Vladimir's feet. From what James Ali Bashir said in a couple of interviews which I heard, he said that Dillian Whyte was giving it everything. He wasn't intimidated or anything like that. And from the first few interviews I'd seen of Dillian Whyte, I got that vibe from him, that he was a fearless kind of character. Almost like a Derek Chisora type character. Very fearless and not intimidated by anyone. I mean, apparently Dillian Whyte, before he even turned professional, he was sparring people like David Haye and Derek Chisora and holding his own with very limited amateur experience. So he's obviously tremendously strong physically. He has tremendous self-belief and determination and a lot of heart. Okay, and he's very physically tough apparently as well. So him fighting Joshua in the pros is an intriguing matchup. And at this stage, with Joshua making the mistakes that I think it would be a great fight. But with Joshua making the mistakes that he's been making, I might even favor Dillian Whyte to beat him. That's right, because I think Dillian Whyte, even though I don't think Dillian Whyte is as talented an athlete as Anthony Joshua is. I think Anthony Joshua has better balance than Dillian Whyte. I think he's got faster hands. He's a bit better coordinated. But I think Dillian Whyte at this stage is more battle-hardened. And I think he has a better idea of how to use his ability. And I also think he's getting better coaching than Anthony Joshua is. So at this stage, I might even pick Dillian Whyte. Obviously, Dillian Whyte is coming off a ban. He won't be back in the ring till October. So we'll have to see what he's like when he gets in the ring. But he's still a young man himself, so I'm sure he'll be okay after a couple of warm-up fights. He'll get back into the swing of things. But yeah, Dillian Whyte against Anthony Joshua could be a very, very good showdown. I don't think Eddie Hearn's going to want it. Obviously, Dillian Whyte's people want it because they don't have the kind of following that Anthony Joshua has. So, and they're confident of winning the fight. But yeah, just one more thing about Dillian Whyte with his extremely long arms and that very good jab that he's got. If I was training Anthony Joshua, I don't know, allow me to, you know, allow me to massage my own ego for a second. But if I was training or at least advising Anthony Joshua going into a fight with Dillian Whyte, in the amateur fight, Joshua was standing on the outside against Dillian Whyte. Okay, because he's the taller guy, so his trainers probably figured you need to keep it long and box him long because you're taller than him. You know, totally discounting the fact, the obvious fact, that Dillian Whyte has got much longer arms than Anthony Joshua. And he knows how to use the length in his arms. So if a guy is superior to you at long range and he's better equipped at long range, then you need to use your feet a lot more educated, right? You need to be a lot more educated with your footwork. And if that's not working, then you need to close down the distance and get inside those long arms. Because guys like Dillian Whyte, with those extremely long arms for their height, tend to be a bit clumsy up close. You know, their hooks are not quite as tight. They're not quite as neat. They're not quite as coordinated up close. So you want to get inside that long reach and, you know, get your more compact, neater, crisper punches off. And Anthony Joshua has very good compact shots that he can throw because he's got much shorter, more compact arms, like a Vladimir Klitschko, maybe even more compact arms than Vladimir Klitschko. Okay? So he's able to maintain his balance a bit better than these extremely long-armed heavyweights, these big, long, heavy arms like Lennox Lewis and Deontay Wilder. These guys can look a bit clumsy. Okay? Those extremely long arms can throw off their balance a little bit. Even Tyson Fury is another one with extremely long arms for his height. Whereas Joshua's a bit more compact in the arms, and once he gets into range, his punches come off a lot more neatly. Okay, a lot more compact, a lot quicker, and a lot neater. So if he was to fight Dillian Whyte again, if he was having the same problems with the jab on the outside, which I anticipate he probably would, then he's actually, in my opinion, going to need to get up close on Dillian Whyte. Not all the time, but in an educated fashion, up close and start getting his hooks off on the inside. Body shots slowing Dillian Whyte down, because Dillian Whyte is not going to be as good with the short punches. Yeah, he's not going to be as crisp and accurate and compact with the short punches as Anthony Joshua is, excuse me. So, yeah, this video's gone on longer than I wanted it to. Apologies for that, but I had a lot to say about not just the Joshua Skelton fight, but Joshua as a fighter in general and his development as a fighter in his career. So, yeah, drop your comments below. Let me know what you feel, if you agree or disagree. This is Hatman, I'm out.